By age 24, Laura Fenamore had tried everything to lose weight. She hated her body. When she finally stopped dieting and started loving herself, she lost 100 pounds. Now, more than 27 years later, she's kept the weight off and works with clients to help them to do the same. In today's episode of the Nutrition Heretic podcast, Laura will reveal her secrets for shedding old beliefs and developing a positive body image. All that and more coming up next. Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being.
Aloha and welcome to the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. And today I would like to tell you to stop chasing weight loss. As you know, I wrote a book called Frenching Your Food, and the purpose of that book was to illustrate that French women really do not chase weight loss per se. Yes, they are concerned with the way that they look, and, they may curb a few calories here and there, but they're not really into starvation. They're not, and clearly they're not dealing with the obesity problem that we are here in the United States. It's no secret that weight loss is a $1 billion industry in the U.S. and it just seems to be growing and growing and growing. How do we stop this? How do we get in touch with where our bodies are supposed to be? And one of the things that has come out of Frenching Your Food is that a lot of people are finding that once they stop worrying, once they stop restricting real food from their diet in favor of something that's completely fake, that the weight loss comes to them. They don't have to chase it anymore, and that they begin to love themselves and they begin to love their food, which is incredibly important. And that brings me to today's guest. She's our guest heretic, Laura Fenamore. She's the author of Skinny Fat Perfect, as well as the website skinnyfatperfect.com. Welcome to the show, Laura.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Oh, well, it's great to have you here because I forget exactly how I stumbled across you, but I said, this is, so many people are talking about, let's not worry about the calories, let's not worry about the fat grams. And then the first thing they do is they tell you to starve yourself on the master cleanse or something for, the first month. and then somehow that's not, a negative impression of food. That's somehow not giving yourself a negative message about food. So what I'd like to do is start out by talking about your story, because you've been through the mill with a lot of things just from looking at your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been through the mill, and part of why I do what I do is because I got a second chance. So can I share with you a little bit about what that second chance was?
Have at it.
All right. So when I was 24 years old, I had a big decision to make. And most 24-year-olds are figuring out what to do after college and looking for their first job. And I was really debating life and death. And when I was 24, I was suicidal. And it was a really, really dark time in my life. So I'm going to take you back a little bit. When I was 24, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am right now. I was an alcoholic. I used drugs regularly. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And my primary addiction, even though I say food was my primary addiction, really it was self-loathing. I hated myself. And there wasn't anything that anyone can say to me that made me think anything differently. Because no matter what a therapist or a counselor or anyone said, or people said, you know, you're so pretty if you would just lose weight. It didn't matter. It didn't penetrate the surface. So just taking you back a little bit further in my life, I was born to a father who told me and my 7 other siblings every day, you should have never have been born. And unfortunately, I took that message and I ran with it. So I believed him. I believed the words that he told me and felt worthless. And, you know, the fact is that he had been abused, and he abused his children every day in every way, verbally, physically, emotionally, mentally. And there was a lot of trauma and drama in my house always. I mean, trips to the hospital were a regular thing, and it was just normal. And in the 50s and the 60s and into the early 70s, child abuse was not talked about. It was still the scarlet letter. And my father, the cops would come to the door when the neighbors would call the cops, and my father would basically threaten them with a bat and they'd leave.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So it was a working class neighborhood on Long Island in New York. And, you know, at 11 years old, something very dramatic happened, which finally got social services involved. My father put my sister into a coma and she was in the hospital. And so that was our ticket out. That was what got us out of the house. And I went into foster care and spent, you know, the next 7 years abusing myself in a very severe way because I had been stripped from my family and taken away from my siblings. I went into foster care by myself, and it was just a really difficult situation. And I just used food and alcohol and drugs and self-hatred as my coping mechanism. I mean, there was no other way to deal. So I just fast forward a bunch of time. I had that at 24. I had it with everything. I was out of control in my addictions in every way. And even though I was extremely young, I was just tired. And so I had this I'm done. I'm tired. I'm going to take my life. I planned it all out, my suicide. And what happened is this angel came in my life, and there was a lot of people told me that I was worth living, but there was something about the way she penetrated my heart. It was very, very strong and very deep. And she's the person that led me to make the decision to keep my life and to go into recovery and get help. And so to this day, Stephanie is my angel, and I thank her for, just being this embodied angel who helped me get into recovery. And so when I was given that second chance at 24, I got myself help. And I know today that it wasn't by accident. And I serve women every day in my life now. And this is what I've been doing for the last 15 years because I healed, I recovered from multiple addictions, eating disorders. I released 100 pounds. I got clean and sober, and I'm about to celebrate in 2 weeks 30 years of sobriety and releasing 100 pounds for life.
Wow.
So I really,
Congratulations.
turned things around, and I know how to do it. And that's what I teach, and that's what I do.
Right, right. So, when you talk about teaching people, you're not really counseling them through kind of the trauma that you went through, correct? Is it more just focusing on, in other words, I don't believe that you want people to think you're a therapist. Is that
No,
correct?
I don't want people
Okay.
to think that I'm a therapist, but I am. For the last 15 years, I've been certified as a coach.
Okay.
And I'm very skilled at what I do because I've lived through this and healed from it. And I understand self-hatred inside and out.
Right.
So while I'm not a therapist, I've helped lots of women around the world heal from a lot of psychic and spiritual and emotional pain.
Right. Right. So, they can work with you on that, but if they're suicidal, let's say, they should also be seeking the help of a therapist.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this work long enough to know what I can handle and what I can't.
Right. Right. Yeah. I just want to make sure that it's set, that this is set straight for anyone who's listening, that, you're kind of not the last stop for them, per se.
Exactly.
If that's where they are in their, in what they're coping with right now, or what the cards they've been dealt.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about Skinny Fat Perfect, first as a book, and then towards the end we can talk more about your program. What you do with people, whether it's in a group or one-on-one setting. So now the book isn't really a weight loss book, even though that may be the result. How do you see this book?
Well, I say it's a self-help memoir because I do teach actual tools in the book on how to begin your journey to self-love. And the thing is that in this Western culture, we're obsessed and fixated on looks and being thin and body image. And body image, as much as, diet books are the hot topic, so is body image becoming more and more, gratefully so, a hot topic. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful because people are starting to wake up and see that women of every size, shape, and weight are worthy of love, and not just skinny women in this culture. And, I talk about weight release only because I was miserable as a fat person. I was not healthy as a fat person. So I choose to be at a healthy weight in my life. And that is what I teach people in sharing, what I did and what worked for me and what works for a lot of my students, getting nutritional help from people like you. But just to be blunt, I'm going to say that it took a lot of emotional and mental energy for me to go from, caring about my heart more than my ass. And really, that's what my work is about, because we are so fixated on the outside that we forget that we can't control the outside until we feel good about ourselves on the inside. Right. And that's where my work comes in. And that's really because I lost 100 pounds, but I still thought that I was a big fat pig because I still talk to myself like that.
Right.
And students of mine will release a bunch of weight, but they'll still feel ugly and not good about themselves. And I mean, usually they'll come to me at that point like, hey, I've obsessed about my body my whole life. I've been, obsessing and it's never good enough. It's never good enough. That it's never good enough has very little, it has nothing to do with truth. It has to do with this ridiculous belief that we all have that we're never rich enough, thin enough, pretty enough, good enough. And that's just a scarcity mentality that's just runs rampant through our culture. And as long as we all live in that mythology, then we're going to be miserable.
Right. Is it just scarcity, or is it something else that's going on that gives us the obsession, kind of the concept, to use a religious reference, of idle hands, being the devil's workshop kind of thing, where it's like, well, I have nothing better going on in my life, so I'm going to complain about this. And the reason why I say that is because there is also this concept that when we are in service of others, that we lose that obsession with ourselves and what's wrong with us. When we whether it's working in a soup kitchen or donating some clothing or food or money to someone else. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Of course I do. And it's absolutely true. It's one of the tenets of AA. It's one of the tenets of you got to give back in order to keep what you have. All of that is true. However, when people are in that state of real disgust and disregard and disrespect for themselves, to actually say to somebody, hey, go help somebody else, they don't know how to do that. I mean, usually that's like a stepping stone that comes, it's not the first stepping stone. Right. I can't help somebody else right now. I hate myself, So it's a place to go. And to me, it's like a very, really healthy, major step for people to get to. But first they have to clean up their own act and get help and support with themselves. The same way that no matter how much people know that carrots and cake are not the same, to get people to go from carrots to cake, celery or carrots is from cake to celery or carrots. There's usually some education that you would give them before they go from one place to another. So it just doesn't happen immediately. And I think to expect that. But what I was going to say is that there's this giant cultural myth, and somebody made up in history, culturally, in every culture, what beauty is. It's a beauty myth. I mean, it's been written over and over and over again. In the Romantic times, that was voluptuous, was considered. And in different cultures, it's people in the Western world are like, oh God, I just wish that I was part of that culture because then I'd be okay to be fat. It's we get to be who we are, and hopefully we make choices about how we look based on who we are, not what we care other people think of us.
Right.
For example, it's I always say that if health isn't at the top of your list of values, then I probably can't help you.
Yeah.
Because it's that's important. And if it's not, that's okay. But it's just important that you know that.
Yes, and that is so important. That was always a problem when I was working with clients, is that so many people would come to me, nutritionist, I have to lose weight. No, I'm a nutritionist. I'm not here to, weight loss might be the result, but what I want to do is help you with the things that are standing in between you and weight loss. Those things that will make you healthier, they'll make you sleep better at night, that will, make you have more energy during the day, that will clear up your skin, and so on and so forth. So I totally get where you're going with that. So, you talk about, just looking at the table of contents of your book, you talk about a lot of things that I think people have heard about before, right? And they think they know it all. Correct. So there's one of them would be shedding old beliefs. And one of the points that you mention in there is people obsessing about their body betraying them instead of them betraying their body. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That, when we feel like victims in the world, and maybe some of us listening to this have been victimized in many different ways. I mean, I can go back to my own stories that I was a victim of child abuse, rape, incest, all kinds of things that are very, very real for people. But being a victim and staying a victim are two different things. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when people are victimized, they need to hate on something and blame something. And an easy thing for women to blame is their body and their health. It's like they're mad and they're upset about what happened, but let me just attack my body. Let me make my body wrong because, you know, I couldn't make that wrong, or I couldn't help myself there. I couldn't. And we're all trained to hate the body. Like if the body doesn't look like Cheryl Tiegs or whatever the model of the day is, I don't think people listening even know who
Cheryl Tiegs. Boy, I'm surprised I even know
Paris
that.
Hilton. Paris Hilton. So whoever is today, it's like that is, it's not okay for me to not look like that. So I'm going to attack the body, and we attack it and we make it wrong and we hate it because it's not cooperating with us.
Right.
So it's like, I hate my legs. I hate my thighs. I hate my belly. I hate my arms. I hate it. 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 Not only is it our home, the vehicle that we have to get through in our lifetime, but it's like so incredibly disrespectful to poop on the thing that is actually giving you the life that you have. I believe people when they tell me that their life is miserable. I know that they don't feel good in their bodies or that they don't feel good in themselves. But I also know that crapping all over the body is not going to help perform better in our lives. It's just not.
Yeah. Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm going to add to that, which is that I believe that doctors are I hate to say it, but a huge, well, maybe I don't hate to say it that much, but they can be a huge part of the problem. And the reason why I say that is because they tend not to focus on core principles such as homeostasis. And instead they send us these messages that your body's constantly trying to betray you. So you go to the doctor and they look at, you know, your blood pressure and your cholesterol, and they're like, oh, there's something wrong with your body. Take a pill. Yep. Because your body is trying to kill you. Take a pill.
Yeah.
As opposed to, this seems a little bit out of whack. Let's find out what's going on underneath that's making this number out of whack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we have kind of, for a lot of people, their doctor is their last stop, right? This is the person that will never steer you wrong and knows way more about your body than you do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now we've put all of this trust in them. Mm-hmm. And they're telling us that our body hates us and wants to sabotage us. Mm-hmm. There's no way out of it unless you take this medication, get that surgery. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So really, I think that just compounds the problem.
Yeah, I do too. Amen to that. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people that, you know, need drugs for actual illnesses that they have, except that there are way more prescriptions that are made every year for people that don't need drugs, that heal other ways that are abused in every way. So it's a crime, actually.
Right.
How many prescriptions are written every year? I mean, if I could write a freaking book about how many doctors have tried to just do like really violent things to my body because and I thought, well, if I didn't have any education and really wasn't conscious and aware of how simple, you know, like what they're saying, I would be maimed by now.
Yeah. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. I could do a whole book on it too. Because we've dealt with, you know, and especially being a Black woman. Oh, they don't like me. They do not like me when I come in and I ask questions that make sense, and they don't have an answer for it. I had, when my daughter was born, they basically did everything they could to get her into the NICU. And then when I inquired about prognosis and what's exactly happening and what should I expect and all those kind of things, the doctor got up and walked away. She didn't even answer me. She was so angry that, everybody else just leaves their kid and they go home and, their baby's just sitting in the NICU. I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand what they were planning on doing to her. And she did not like that at all.
Yeah. Sorry that happened to you, but I'm glad.
But, usually I don't even go to like the race place. But knowing people who had been in that hospital, of other persuasions, they told me what the staff would say about the darker skinned patients.
Yep.
And so that's the only reason that I even bring that part up.
And we're intuitive beings, and it didn't even matter if anyone said anything about the race. You knew intuitively that you were more powerful, and you were just being who you were, and that she was judging you, and it's just like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to put up with this crap.
Yeah. And what was interesting was that when she went off duty that night and the next morning, there was a male doctor who came in, also Caucasian. And I asked him the same question and he said, "You look responsible. I'm going to send the baby home with you today." so that just goes to show how different, it's almost like good cop, bad cop, right? How different these two people, their perceptions were in that moment. So in any case, let's get back to your book. You also talk about responsibility, and the responsibility for your body image, what you conceive to be your body.
Yeah. So I used to have a poster when I was in a foster care on the wall in my foster care house that said, "Bless the beast and children. They have no voice. They have no choice." When we're children, we're helpless. We're dependent on adults to take care of us and to manage us. As adults, we're supposed to be responsible for ourselves. And it's not easy for people to be responsible when they're in a tremendous amount of pain. But we are at choice about everything that we do as adults, not as children, but as adults. It's very, very simple. But oftentimes when we're victims and when we're in a lot of psychic pain and psychic wounding, we want to just blame people, places, and things, and certainly our bodies. So it's hard to take responsibility and make choices when everybody's wrong and you're right, or people don't understand, or whatever it is that's going on. So what I ask people to do, that the first step, the first lesson, the first thing that I talk about in my book is about taking responsibility for where you are now, right now, not what happened, not where you want to go. But, the gurus have made it, Eckhart Tolle made it very famous when he talked about living in the moment, which of course is like the most basic spiritual concept, living in the now. But it's very challenging for people to live in the now because we want to live in the past and the future and what's happened and what is going to happen or what we want to create. So we can have memories from the past and we can have an amazing future, but we got to start with now. So I take responsibility now for what happened leading up to this point. And that sounds very simple to say, but to actually live it is kind of radical for people to do. Because when they think about their past, it's like there's a lot of blame that goes, blaming my ex-husband or my friends or my family or whatever got me, or my mother-in-law, it enforces me eating like this, or I only eat like this because and there's a lot of lack of responsibility. It's like, I don't care who wants me to eat what. I take responsibility for my health and who I am at this point in my life. And that's where my choices come from, not from what other people tell me to do. I follow my guidance and I make responsible choices.
Right. Now, do you think that for a lot of people, and that's the thing, is your story, for lack of a better description, is extreme. For most people are not dealing with the type of abuse that you dealt with. You're able to take responsibility nonetheless. So
yes,
to see someone, you see where I'm going? So, someone who hasn't, like
childhood.
Like my childhood was like pretty much like Leave It to Beaver, right? So, it's just like kind of normal, everyday thing. But still, I guess where I'm going with this is that I was not necessarily equipped with that. My parents, I'm not blaming them. This is just just like your dad was a product of what he grew up with and couldn't come to terms with that. My parents were a product of their upbringing in Jamaica. Which was not focusing on this kind of personal responsibility and these concepts that we're talking about.
Yeah, I get it. I hear it.
So, what can we do? And this is I'm looking at the future generation. What can we do? Because I struggle with this with my kids. Daisy looked at me, so I'm going to drop my food on the floor or whatever, What can we do for future generations to get them to understand how to take responsibility and to start training our kids to learn how to take responsibility?
Yeah. And, first of all, I always say I'm not for everybody, and not everybody. I can't help, the world. I can help one person that's looking at a time. Mm-hmm. But I know that my story is extreme, and I know that not everybody had a difficult childhood. However, I also know that a tremendous amount of human beings struggle with what they see when they look in the mirror and what they eat. Because especially in the Western world, we would not have, in the United States in particular, we would not have an obesity epidemic if people were grooving on what they were eating. It's a big problem out there. So I think that there is a lot more blame that's happening than there is responsibility, and taking real responsibility for our health and for our lives. And you know what? It's not for everyone, Adrienne. Some people are like, hey, I'm fat and I'm happy and I am like so grateful. I am the happiest person in the world. I am so happy for those people. I'm like, right on, man. I'm really concerned about people that struggle and suffer and obsess and are fixated every day. And like, in your case, you like help people so amazingly that are like, hey, wait a minute. There's like a million different messages out there about what to eat. And you're like, okay, here's what good food is. Here's what to eat. And here's the science behind it, which is brilliant. So I am only concerned about people that just really suffer and struggle with it. Mm-hmm. Happy people don't come to me. I haven't, they just don't, which is good. They're happier.
Yeah, totally.
So in terms of how to learn how to take responsibility, I think that it's something that is just taught through, I can tell somebody how to do it, but until I'm living it, it doesn't matter. So I have to live what I'm teaching. Right. And that's what I do, is I do live what I teach. And that means that I take responsibility. And let me just give you an example of a student of mine who, while we were working together, got 4th stage cancer. Mm-hmm. And, while she understands where it came from, but it doesn't matter. What matters is living and dealing with it in the present moment. And how she's dealing with it is extremely responsible, extremely conscious. And she's not, blaming her parents and her ex-boyfriend and her ex-husband and all the people that, could have contributed to, people want to blame their genes, or they want to blame this, or they want to blame that. It's like, this is what happened. I am now going to take this information and be responsible with it and take action in order for me to heal.
Right. Now, do you find that in some cases people, again, focusing on responsibility, but the blame talk, the rut, let's say, that they find themselves in becomes too much of their identity? Like,
yes.
And that this is basically asking them, and even in terms of the weight, it's asking them to lose themselves. And to some extent, yes, that is what we want, right? We kind of want them to get lost in these concepts, right? To let go of some of these things, but that for many people, maybe it hits further down to the core, where they feel that they're losing their why.
Yeah.
Is there a way to dig yourself out of that hole once you identify so clearly with that, and this is, because I have friends who've been trying to, quote unquote, lose weight for 30 years. Mm-hmm. My mom spent my entire life until maybe about a decade before she died, trying to, that was her identity, somebody who was always on a diet.
Well, you just nailed a huge part of my work, which is that it's about changing your story, and it is changing your identity. And that's not to say that you become a different person. It's just that we become so unbelievably attached to our habits and to who we are that we believe that's who we are. Mm-hmm. That we are fixated on, I am always going to be an obese, fat person. And the beliefs, before we started the podcast, we were actually talking, and, a lot of people talk about beliefs, and it's something that's like, yeah, I know I have positive beliefs and I do affirmations and I believe this and I believe that. Getting to the roots of beliefs is a process and a practice. It's not something that happens overnight. I can't read 20 affirmations for 30 days and expect for my beliefs over 5 decades of my life to change. It just doesn't work that way. If I believe on a very, very deep gut level that I will always be this way, then I'm always going to be this way. So, humans are complicated. Mm-hmm. And I said taking responsibility is the first step, because we have to begin by actually acknowledge that we do have very strong rooted beliefs. And we also have strong, a lot of times people blame their body and blame other people. So to actually take our power back and say, I'm responsible for my health and my well-being from this moment forward. And yeah, maybe I've spent the last 30 years not being so kind to myself, or I've hung out with people that haven't been so kind to me. But from this moment on, I want to change my story.
Right. So talk to us about what productive discomfort is.
So the fact is that we as humans, I think, have to get really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Because I have a great life today and I'm still uncomfortable a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean that I just know how to deal with it. And I say to my students from the very beginning, you know what, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because there's no magic nirvana. Unless you become an enlightened master, you're going to be in a body with an ego. You're going to hit up against people. You are going to be uncomfortable. And that means that you have to learn how to be with discomfort without using and abusing food, alcohol, drugs, whatever the heck your drug of choice is. Mm-hmm. And, in your case, it's probably chocolate cake for people that are coming to you. They're like, hey, I've been eating chocolate cake for 50 years and now I want to start eating carrots, or maybe 20 years or however long they've been eating. Because it's a go-to place. It's totally culturally acceptable. People have to eat every day, which leads me to that frustrating thing is people come to me all the time and just are so mad. I met with a woman last week and I love her dearly. And she just gave me the thing, which was, Laura, I'm just off. I'm so off. You don't have to gamble. You don't have to shop. You don't have to drink. You don't have to do drugs, but you have to eat. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to change the perspective on that. Is that, yeah, you have to eat because your body needs food. Mm-hmm. And to actually say how much you hate food, I just want to bring some awareness to that. Mm-hmm. That right there is like all over your body and food.
Right.
That there's just this off frustration about, God, I wish I didn't have to eat.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what Frenching your food is about. It's about that relationship. And I encourage people, have a love relationship with your food. You know, really just fall in love with it. The French, they sit there and they relish their pâtés and their butter and all of these things. Yeah. And it's, you can see, the thought process that goes on with it. And so much, I believe, of when it comes to the food role in American culture in particular, but I think pretty much any country that speaks English these days is, for one thing, we only look at it for caloric content.
Right.
So, that immediately puts half of of the food that we can eat, off the table because we're worried about the fat grams. We're worried about too much this, too much that, da, da, da. But then all you're left with is synthetic when you get into that place. There are French people right now eating, I guess, dinner, just finished dinner or whatever, thinking about what they're going to eat tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And there are people here in Hawaii, let's just say, right, who maybe just had breakfast and they are not even thinking about what they're going to have for lunch yet. Mm-hmm. So we wait and we delay our focus on food until the only thing that we can find is chocolate cake.
That's right.
We don't think about it ahead of time and say, I think I'll go clean up a couple of carrots and have that for lunch, or with my lunch, have a salad or what have you. So to my mind, the less we think about food, the more we kind of, we think of food as the equivalent of, having sex in an alley with a stranger. The more we treat it that way, the more negative those interactions are going to be.
Yeah. Well, remember what I said about humans are very complex. I completely agree with you in everything that you just said from where I am now.
Right.
But when I was obsessed with food and thinking about it 24/7 and I couldn't wait to get to my next bite. And people that are very, very addicted to food, they are desperately trying to stop thinking about food because that's their only source of, it's just distracting them from actually dealing with the real issue. It's a great distractor. Mm-hmm. So in my perfect world, I love to be thinking about food in terms of nutrition and what, and I do, what am I going to eat this week? I'm somebody that spends her Saturdays and Sundays getting ready for the week, but I've trained myself completely. And I can say that a lot of my students now do that too. They know, because I've taught them that, if really health is the highest value, then you gotta, but that negligence that you're talking about is, it's not where most of my students are. They're mostly obsessed with when am I going to get my next bite, and only filling the house with crap. I mean, that's the life that they've led, is right. That, there's been a lot of sugar and dairy and carbs and all kinds of stuff around, and that's what they live on. And, it's so training people to not only be nutritionally sound, but also to be thinking about food just in the way you described it, in the most delightful way. I want to have a really wonderful meal tomorrow versus I can't wait to get my next cupcake.
Right.
Very different energy. Very different energy.
Right. Where do you think that comes from when, they're the hankering is always for the cupcake and the Cheetos and Well, maybe not Cheetos that much anymore, but
this culture is such a giant paradox. And I want to, it's so easy for me to say, oh God, just blame the culture. But I don't teach that blame is the way through. So, but I mean, we live in this crazy paradigm and paradox of we, get thin now. Every diet known to person, there's a designer diet, there's a fad diet right now. It's paleo and keto and whatever the diet fad is that's happening for the year. It happens every year. Everybody has the right answers. Everybody knows what's right.
Exactly.
It's all obsession, craziness. And then we have this insanity with how many more cooking channels are there going to be? How many more cookbooks are going to be out? Every cover of every magazine in this culture is lose weight. Even Oprah, lose weight and go on this diet and here's my 5,000 Southern Comfort recipes. So it's this big, giant, ridiculous paradox of like, well, which one is it? Do I go to my comfort foods or do I lose weight? And unfortunately, because the culture goes to food, because it's the ultimate comforter. I mean, we're born, and the first thing that we get, if we're lucky, is we get to be held by a parent, but we get fed to be because we're hungry, but it also becomes our first form of comfort and love is getting fed. Mm-hmm. So it starts early, and some of us, get attached to that food being comfort. And then voila.
The thing is, I don't know that the French don't find food comforting. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a difference between the comfort foods of their culture versus what we think of as comfort foods. And some of our comfort foods, they're pretty legitimately actually, just food, versus dessert. But somehow we always opt for the dessert, not the food side of it. You see where I'm going?
Oh, of course. But when you think about it, when you're a kid and when sugar and McDonald's and pizza and all of that becomes your reward, you're taught really young that that's your reward. Now you might be, and there's lots of parents out there that they're exceptions to the rule, that those aren't the rewards for my kids. But most parents give their kids rewards. I mean, my reward was Carvel and pizza and all kinds of stuff for being good. And I couldn't wait. That was it. And they're, now like kids are obsessed with video games and all kinds of stuff that are other distractors for rewards. But for the most part, food is still, because people come to me all the time and say, I don't know how to not make food a reward for my child because they're so wanting to keep up with the Joneses and their mothers give their, but what do? I don't want to be a control freak, but I also don't want my kid to, be only getting rewards as food. And I say, first of all, talk about it, but also, I mean, depending on how old the child is, but, there are healthy rewards that can be fun foods. And I think
Yeah. So, for us, it's always with the kids. We never made anything synthetic a reward. But, hey, if we do this, maybe we can make a peach pie tonight, so we're still having pie, but it's like a really good one. And my kids, they've tried other things because they see their friends eat it and they say, I thought it would be good, but it really wasn't, or my stomach hurts, or, whatever it is. And they recognize that that's not even food. And I could go into Tide Pods right about now.
Well, tell your children that you interviewed somebody today who said to tell the kids they are so incredibly lucky to have you two as parents. So incredibly lucky. I mean, really, Adrienne, you should kiss yourself for that you're conscious and you're aware and that you care about their bodies and nutrition. and that you take the time to make a peach pie with them is just beautiful, and it's brilliant, and it's not the norm, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was, I think, when we were kids.
For sure.
You know, a little bit more of that, that snowy day, maybe you'd make some chocolate chip cookies, as opposed to going by the pre-made ones. So you at least know what's in there, right?
Yep.
Because I always say that, no matter what you eat, just eat the best version of it. Eat the most sinful, delicious. Don't just, don't skimp on the calories so you can have, a whole box of it. Just have one really good homemade chocolate chip cookie with the real butter in it and, really dense chocolate.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap this up soon, and there's so many things that I want to talk to you about, but tell me a little bit about how the Course in Miracles helped you on your path.
Well, that is part of my spiritual path, which I came connected to in the late 80s, a long time ago. And I went to a class, and the gentleman leading the class talked about that the course was about learning how to forgive people, and knowing about my brutal past and knowing how tortured I had been by my father, and knowing that I had a lot to forgive. I felt like I was home. That was a long time ago. It was in the late 80s, actually, only about 10 years after the course came out. But it gave me a roadmap to learning forgiveness on a very deep level and understanding what forgiveness was about. Because as I was telling this woman this morning, actually at the bank, she was going on and on about how much she couldn't stand her daughter-in-law and her son is just, ugh. And I said, resentment is drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. And, the more we hold on to anger from the past, and the more we're going to suffer. Mm-hmm. And I know that people have had difficult times in their lives. And if nothing else, I can just say that, forgiveness does not mean that we forget, and it doesn't mean that we make other people right. It just means that it's freedom for us to have a healthier, happier life. Mm-hmm. So the course gave me a roadmap and tools to learn how to forgive and how to live in love. And the course isn't something that people do, it's something that people live. I mean, you learn about it and then you live the principles of the course. And that is what I'm proud to say. I've been a student since the late 80s. So it's something that I continue to practice. And I have a giant framed poster in my wall from A Course in Miracles, a quote. And it says, "I'm here only to be truly helpful. I'm here to represent Him who sent me. I don't have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I'm content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal." And people get very, very strung out about the male pronouns in A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff just does not use whatever you need to. Exactly. The message is all about love.
Exactly. I've always thought of him used in that term as more of an it, a universal. It's our catch-all term, not specifically meaning male. Right. And it does sort of get under my skin when I hear people harp on that as opposed to the actual message. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that you kind of underscored that. But it's very enlightening, to hear that we can let go of those stories, right? We can pursue forgiveness without and focus on our happiness versus being right. And I think that's where so many people get caught up. I know one person I was working with years ago with EFT. I was doing emotional freedom technique tapping with her, and she was going through a tough time, and she just could not get past the forgiveness statement. Mm-hmm. Why should I have to forgive her? And I said, well, because you want to be happy. You know, you're not forgiving her for what she did to you. You're forgiving her for not being enlightened enough to understand how what she did harmed you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a huge difference. And unfortunately, she could never get past that statement or any permutation of forgiveness, not even for herself, it seemed. She, because why should I have to forgive myself? She's the one who did it to me. I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah. Yeah, but the question that I would say to that person is who suffers? Like who really suffers now? Like, she might be suffering, but that doesn't matter right here, right now. You're the person that's suffering.
Exactly.
And I think that the most, powerful thing that you brought up and that I think was shared on this call was about the identity of identifying so strongly with being, a weight defective. I can't make peace with food. I can't make peace with my body. That's the story that people live into. Mm-hmm. And they're so incredibly identified with that story that who would they be without that story? And that's why I believe that underlying everything is fear, and people are desperately afraid to be happy. Mm-hmm. And if they're happy, like, what would that even look like? I could never be happy. How could I be happy? And, we're so much more identified with suffering than we are with joy and happiness. And when people are happy, they're kind of freaks. So if I didn't identify with being, a crazy person around my food and with my body and diet obsessed, who would I be? And I think that's the question that people might want to ask themselves. Who would I be? And like I say, very simply, you could be happy, but being happy is not easy for people.
It's true. And there is, I don't know if it comes from a Puritan or, self-flagellating kind of culture. But yeah, we tend to literally beat up on ourselves.
Yeah, and that doesn't, being happy. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say being happy does not take away sexism, racism, homophobia, ageism. It doesn't take any of the absolute just civil rights violation, everything that exists. But suffering actually doesn't do anything but add to that. I think that the happier people are individually, the more energy that they have to be out there on the front line. Like you can be pissed off about what's happening and also happy at the same time.
Right.
One doesn't preclude the other.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's I say this a lot on the podcast, which is that we've become obsessed with either or instead of both and.
Yeah.
And we don't recognize that two things can coexist.
Yep.
Without belittling or diminishing the importance of either of them. So Laura, tell us about your program, how people can get signed up and where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I offer free tools at skinnyfatperfect.com, and I have some options for self-study courses, and then I work with people individually one-on-one, and once or twice a year I teach my course called Body Image Mastery as a group class. And yeah, people can find all that information at skinnyfatperfect.com. And my book, Skinny Fat Perfect, Love Who You See in the Mirror, is at Amazon.
Fantastic. That is wonderful. And you're also on Facebook?
I am. Yeah.
I think I'm connected to you on Facebook. All right. And that's at Skinny Fat Perfect, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And my private Facebook group is Love Who You See in the Mirror. But Skinny Fat Perfect is my business page.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us, for enlightening us on the importance of maintaining that positive body image and loving yourself, because I think we've all heard that you can't love someone else until you love yourself. Right. And I think that we really need to take that to heart and, find that. I once heard Tyra Banks said, what is that one thing? Everybody has one thing that they could totally love about themselves. Maybe start there. With her, it's her eyes. She's like, if I could, hate on my butt, whatever, but I've got eyes that nobody else has. Those are her thing. Find that one thing, right? Would you say that's a good place to start for people, to just find one thing they appreciate about themselves?
That is exactly what I teach. I say function over form, and we start with appreciating the function of our body, like what is working. Right. You might not like the form right now, and it might take some time for you to accept a crooked mouth or something. But if you could just appreciate that you actually have a mouth, or that you have a nose, and that there are people in the world that don't.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I always do this. I say I'm going to end the podcast and I start talking about something else. But my mom, when I was a kid, I had really bad eczema, and my mom would always, didn't matter if we were out in public, whatever, she was always harping about, oh, it's so horrible, you have eczema. And I think what it was I had seen a woman, we were in a McDonald's of all places, but McDonald's was actually made out of food back then. We were in a McDonald's, and there was a woman who now I recognize probably was a victim of thalidomide. And she did not have arms. She had hands coming, protruding straight from her shoulders. And I said, every time my mom would say that, I'd say, yeah, but I have both my legs. I have both my arms. Yeah. I'd find something just, that most of us just take for granted. Yeah. At least I have legs to have eczema. Right. So, sometimes we have to go that far to find the positive. But, it all starts with gratitude. Yeah.
Yeah. It all does start with gratitude. And just appreciating, it's a way to begin. Function over form. Function over form. So, well,
if only we could hear a chorus of that. Thank you so much, Laura, for your time today. And everybody, don't forget to check her out, skinnyfatperfect.com, and the book, Skinny Fat Perfect. Love Who You See in the Mirror. Is that correct?
That is right.
And that is at Amazon.com.
Yeah. I'm so grateful to you and your work, Adrienne. Thank you for being a voice of health, and I really appreciate what you do a lot.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me.
It's true. And don't forget, tell your kids they're so lucky to have you as a mom.
I'm not only going to say it, I'm going to replay this for them so they can hear it. See, it's not just me.
There
She's saying
go.
It. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean. And our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.